Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to another Cars and Coffee with me, Kenny Brown, where we'll discuss a whole bunch of tech stuff. Today, we've got some pretty interesting things. We've got Tony, the tuner, to talk about one of the track app type things. And we've got the JRZs that were supposed to be here last week. That when we called Friday to find out where they were, they said they were at the Charles de Gaulle Airport. Well, they actually showed up this week, and I just put them together tomorrow, so we're going to talk about them for a little bit. And, of course, answer your questions. And if you have any questions, certainly send your questions in live. I'll try to answer them as best I can. If I know the answer, I'll tell you. If I don't know the answer, I'll tell you that too. So let's see. I think what we're going to do, Tony's going to be talking about Tony the Tuner, who many of you may have seen before. We've had him on talking about tuning Mustangs. Well, he works for HP, and they have a track app, and that stems out of Chris asked a question. He said, on data collection, I'm looking at the Garmin Catalyst, AIM Solo, Apex Pro, Race Logic, etc. I'm leaning towards the Garmin for ease of use and robo coaching. What my thoughts are? Well, unfortunately, I have very little experience with any of those. As far as AIM, I have experience with the AIM, the Pro system that are on race cars, but not any of the track type apps. So what I did is I said I'd find somebody who could talk to that subject. So we found out that HP has an app, and so Tony's going to come on and tell us about that in a little bit. So I think Herschler had a question about tuning, and maybe Tony can add to this. He says he wants to know any hacks or suggestions for no timing pulling on the track. Well, I think the best way to not have timing pulled out on the track is keep your temperature down and use really good gas. It's only going to pull timing if it sees knock, and if you've got good gas, really good premium gas, and you're keeping the temperatures under control, it shouldn't be pulling timing out. But I think when Tony's on, he could probably speak to that more directly. And let's see. Adam has this. He says, I'm sure the topic has been covered, but I'm installing front brake ducts on my 2014 GT, and I was wondering if anybody has any pictures of where they route the hose. I've got mine mocked up, but my tires are rubbing on the hose when the wheel is turned all the way. Actually, I don't know if you got our hose kit. There's actually a series of pictures in there on how to route it, and I think one of the things you could do is if there's a little skirt in there, you take that skirt off and put it underneath the frame rail. We have with our hose kit, we've got like great big long zip ties, and you can position the hose underneath the frame rail with great big long zip ties, and that kind of keeps it tucked out of the way. Otherwise, it's like that. You're running into one of the biggest quandaries of all time is where to put that damn brake duct hose. And if it's a 4-inch hose, you have a lot less room to work with. That's why I always use a 3-inch duct hose, and we talked about that before. How by using a 3-inch duct with our brake ducts, I can oval the inlet into the rotor, and 100% of the air goes right into the eye of the rotor for maximum cooling. Or if you got a 4-inch, it's going to hit on the edge, and you're not going to get all the air in. Part of it's going to hit on the face of the rotor, which is a couple of not nice things. But I think that reminds me. We're having a brake workshop. June 30th, Wednesday evening, June 30th. So there'll be more information coming up on that. And I'm sure we'll talk about that more then. But yeah, that's why I use the 3-inch brake duct. And I don't know if it's our hose kit, there should be with the instructions, there should be a suggested routing. The other thing too is if there's absolutely no way you can get it routed without the tire hitting the hose on full lock, then get yourself a set of steering rack limiters from a GT500 that'll keep it from turning all the way. So there's a couple of suggestions for you. And then I think, Steve, there's been some discussion on this. Want to know if our S550 jacking rails would work with the Watson Racing tie-down hooks. I believe the tie-down hooks hook to the K-member, if I'm not mistaken. I haven't looked at them for a while, but I think they hook to the K-member where the jacking rail is behind the wheels. It's like mid-chassis. So, and I would guess it should. Like I say, as far as I can recall, the hooks are on mount to the K member itself. So with that, I think when we pop into, we've got, like I say, last week we were supposed to do our JRZ Pros because we had a couple of sets coming in, so that would be a great opportunity to talk about them again, because this is an absolutely fabulous shock. I mean, if you can't afford like a $10,000 set of race shocks, the JRZ Pro is, in my opinion, one of the best choices you can make for track days and for club racing, because it's like this short of a full-on race shock at about half the price. So what makes them so special? Well, I'll start with the rear because it's lighter. But as you can see, this has a remote canister. Now, the RS Pros are a monotube shock, which means there's only one tube, one piston. Most shock absorbers are twin tube. They're either twin tube to atmosphere, which means there's no give to them, or they're like low pressure gas, which actually they'll expand a little bit. But you can only mount a twin tube straight up and down. Otherwise, the fluid gets kind of mixed in with the air and the gas, and it just doesn't work very well. With a monotube shock, you can mount them anywhere you want. So what we do on the back, we actually flip them upside down and kind of mount them like this, so that we can route the tube into the trunk. And the other thing we do, because these are like a race shock, they have double spherical bearings on mounting. So we invert them upside down. So we put the top bushings on the bottom, and then we come up with this nifty little bolt-in that bolts right into where the shock used to go. So you can run a race shock without having to do any modifications, welding, or cutting, or anything. But the thing about double adjustable monotubes is the fact that the canister, the remote canister, that's your bump control. And on the shock itself, it typically will be on the top, and in this case, it's going to be on the bottom. That's your rebound control. So with the cool thing about the bump is you can actually stick it in the trunk, or with the struts, to the front struts, you can actually mount this underneath the hood. So it's really on the front. It makes it just a piece of cake to adjust your shocks, because you got the rebound, you put the bump right next to it, a couple of clicks here or there, and away you go. And this is the way that when we do shocks, this is the way they come to you. Completely pre-assembled and pre-adjusted. And there's a data sheet that accompanies that says what the shocks are, the adjustment. Oh, here it is over here. Yeah, that's a data sheet that goes with it. It says a spring rate and the initial adjustments, along with a mini tuning guide in the bottom, and then the second page has a little more information on shock tuning. But the big recommendation is, if you're having questions on getting your shocks tuned, call me and I'll help you out, because it's pretty easy to really mess up shock adjustment. I mean, if just for example, if there's 12 clicks of bump adjustment, 12 clicks of rebound adjustment, that's what 144 different combinations on one shock, and you've got 4 shocks, so you just multiply that again. So the number of different combinations is pretty staggering. So I always tell people, you always want to make shock adjustments one click at a time, small adjustments, unless you really have a lot of experience and you know what you're doing, because it's really easy to adjust yourself into the fence when you start doing shock adjustments. That's why they come pre-adjusted and along with a guide, so you don't have to just guess at it right away. Just bolt them on and go. Also, the spring rates I custom select for each individual customer. Now both of these, this has 650 front and 650 rear, which is a pretty stout spring setup, but it's because this is a AGS 4.5. It's got the new rear suspension on it. And because there's so much grip in the new rear suspension, we have to increase spring rate significantly to rebalance the car. Otherwise, they're just a tremendous amount of push because there's so much grip in the back, it completely overwhelms the front. So the JRZ RS Pros, they're fabulous shocks. I mean, they work like crazy, easy to adjust, and they drive well. They make the car handle well. So if you're thinking about, if you really like to have race shocks that don't have the budget for them, the RS Pros are a really good option. And they come with a long lineage of motorsports. I mean, that's the whole thing I like about the JRZs is their main business is motorsport shocks. I mean, that's like 80% of their business are race shocks in Europe. And then the RS line is their sort of like their clubsman type shock absorbers, which share a lot of the technology of the race shocks, but they're kind of like moved down just a little bit to make them affordable for the track day and club racing guys. So we are on the JRS Pros. And if you got questions, be sure to send them in. And we're going to have Tony here, and I'm sure you're going to have a lot of questions for him. So I think I'm moving right along this morning. So before we do Tony, if YouTube, please like and click the subscribe button and the little bell to get notifications. And also Facebook, please like and share. If you have some friends that might be interested in what we're going to talk about today, there's a way you can get like share right on the spot. There's a button there that you can just click and add your friends and have them join us. So with that, I think if Carrie can help me out, we'll bring in Tony. Tony the tuner. Good morning, Tony.
Good morning.
Now, we've had you on before talking about tuning Mustangs, and that was pretty popular. I think we may have to have you back again talking about tuning. But today you're going to talk about a track app that HP has that I wasn't familiar with, so this is going to be educational for me too. But also, I'm going to revert back to Christopher's question when he said, let's see, what do you know about any hacks or suggestions for no timing pulling on the track? And my suggestion was keep the temperature down and use good gas. Would you have anything to add to that?
Absolutely. So the first and foremost thing, the major two functions are going to come into play with obviously octane of the fuel. If the NOx sensor is actually going to pull time to do the octane. If it's a heat related problem, it's either inlet air temperature sensor or engine coolant temperature. If your engine coolant temperature is at 220, 240 degrees, the computer is going to pull timing. It's going to try to save itself. That is the way of life. If the inlet air temperature is above 130, 140, there's multipliers that go with that as well, and it will start pulling timing at that point. So in a naturally aspirated car, it's normally not that big a deal. But when you get in a supercharged car, as you're going through the turns and coming out of it, your inlet air temperatures will rise. We call them a downstream temperature. Your downstream temperatures could rise up to 130, 180 to 200 degrees. If it goes over 130, 140 degrees, it's going to pull timing. If it does not, you're going to get towed off the racetrack. It's pretty much a common thing. If you are running, a C16 race fuel or something like that, it's a very dense fuel that will allow you to get away with more heat without the timing being pulled. Just remember that once you get to a point, there's no return. You have to make sure that it does return timing. So in the drag strip world, we have guys that run bracket cars. We'll actually dampen the NOx sensors and the inlet air temperature strictly because it's on a drag strip. But they're in a controlled environment and they quarter mile pass are done. On a road race or a road course, you're putting it through its paces lap after lap after lap. If you start seeing your lap times drop and you look at your data log and you see your temperatures going up and up and up and the time is being pulled, you need to figure out a way to cool it, whether it's engine coolant temp or the inlet air temp sensor cool. That's the bottom line on there.
The temperature and octane.
Yep.
Are the keys.
Yep.
Okay. Well, Hertzberg, I hope that helps. But now to the main event. You're going to talk to us about HP has a track app.
Absolutely. So a couple of years ago, there was a demand and they started working on it. And at first it was more of a computer-based deal. And now it's an app for your phone. Whether you have an Android or you have an iPhone, the app is there. You go to the Play Store, you're going to download it and go through the sequence. We're going to talk a little about that here in just a second. But the app is really good. It's telemetry data. It uses the GPS. Most critical part to all of this is to make sure that it's actually in the window mount on a solid mount, not bouncing around. Don't stick in the cup holder. Don't stick it in the door panel because it's going to lose signal and your data is not going to be correct. But that's where the Track Addict came from, was the world. People, they wanted to seek telemetry data. So they designed it. And there's two parts to it. There's the Track Addict, and there's actually a race render. We'll talk more about the Track Addict because that's the function you're using to look at it and see, what you're doing and data log it. The race render is later on. You can look at your stuff and data log. You can compare it to other people's cars, everything like that. But the Track Addict is the main function.
Okay, so you can just go on the App Store and download it.
Yeah, you can go right on there to the App Store or the Google Play, and you go right on there. You type in Track Addict. It's going to give you a little symbol. You download it. It's free to download. There is an upgrade if you're doing some other stuff in the future. We'll talk about that. But the main function is free. You can download it right to your Android or your iPhone.
Now, is there's something that goes with it? You can plug into the OBD2 sensor to put the engine function?
Absolutely. So if you're using your own pass-through, there are some, we'll talk Bluetooth for a second. So obviously we want to communicate with the phone, whether it's the iPhone or your Android. We recommend obviously the MPVI2 or an RTD unit, which is the unit we use, and it's a Bluetooth. You set it up on that. Not only will you actually get your telemetry data, but you can actually get your temperatures, just like we were talking about. You can see the NOx sensor while it's timing. You can see what your inlet air temperatures are. You can see your engine coolant temperatures. You're going to see that rise when you go into the turn and come out of the turn. You're going to see the rise follow. It's an ebb and flow like the tide. That's exactly what your coolant temperatures and your inlet air temperatures will do as you go through the corners as well as come out straightaways.
So how many different functions does this Track Addict track? I mean, how can people actually physically use it to drive better?
Okay, so a couple things. One of the things that we like to bring up is the main thing is that you have data. Starting out with your lap times. You can set up from there. You're going to have speed. You're going to have, and it will actually plot out the course. I think there's 1,000 courses in there, or you can put your own course in there. Racetracks all over, whether you're Rolling Roads, whether you're in Laguna Seca, all these are in the app already. So when you put yourself in that position, it's going to follow you on that track. That's how nice this is set up. So, it's less work, simple for us. We're all want to keep things simple. So if it's on there already, we say, hey, we're at Laguna Seca and we're going to use this. It tracks us at that point. It tracks us on the track. That's
pretty cool.
Yep.
So they can actually see where they're braking and their corner G's and all that sort of thing.
Absolutely. So the technical lap times, like we said, with the braking, everything, you can see where you're going in. You see where your timing is on that point. You can measure that timing as well. I tell everyone on there, it's free. Go download it, put it on your phone, go put it in your car, go drive around a little bit, see how it does, and get used to the buttons and what you want to see. Everyone wants to see their own certain thing. So I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I like seeing the actual, not only the lap time, but when I'm in the corner or coming out of the corner, I did an autocross here recently. I used it, and I was able to see where I was slowing down too much. I was able to see that with the braking, because I could see the braking coming on. So I was able to push myself farther into it just by looking at the app.
Well, I think the price has to be a real plus.
Absolutely,
it's the price point.
Yeah, it's a great thing. People realize that basically it's an app on your phone. You set it up, you get the mounted on the windshield. You have it in front of you. It records it. It's got video record, so you see the run as well. So you can time all that together.
Well, that's pretty, you said there's some upgrades you can get along with that.
Yeah, the upgrades there are some upgrades to it. Obviously, using MPVI2 and stuff like that for inputs as well. There's a whole bunch of upgrade stuff you can do. The actual driving line analysis stuff. I'm looking off of my notes here. So the graphs, you can do comparisons between laps. Those are all things that are on there. It's a very detailed setup. It works very well. And people really who didn't know about it, once they find it, they go, why didn't anybody tell me about this? Hence why I'm here.
Well, that's pretty cool. I'm sure we're going to have some questions rolling in here. So Carrie or Brad, let us know if any questions pop up. So is there anything else that you haven't told us about the Track app yet?
So a couple of things on the Track app. One of the things that the guys will do, well, I did as well in the autocross, is basically I set up the course. So the autocross was a custom course, so it wasn't in there. So when I drove the course, it followed me. I set it in there. I made that my course, and then from then on, I could just track myself on it through the corners, through the chicanes, and then actually on the pins. So using it, basically, it's how you want to use it, depending on what you're using it for. If it's an autocross or a road course, again, you've got the timing there on it. One of the main things, it's easy to work with. You push the button, it sets records, you hit the button to stop recording it. The log is there. You can save it to your laptop. You can play it back. You can look at all the timing. Basically, you can tutor yourself through it. If you know how to handle a race car or performance car, you can push the button normally to find where you're at on the racetrack. So on the Android version, let's see, almost all the functions are on there. On the iPhone, there's a couple of functions that are not there that have to be purchased, but the upgrades are way up there. When you start using the basics of it, when you get to the point where you need those upgrades, you're obviously pushing the car really, really hard, and you already understand the basics of it. Don't try to do the complicated stuff first. Start out with the basics, right? So start out with the base functions, record it, look at your logs, look at your time on it. It's easy to push the button and upload it and download it. The app itself, super user friendly. So if anyone is out there right now and has the app on their phone or doesn't have it, go to the website right now and download it. Put it on the app right now on your phone so that you can start looking at it and playing with the functions and see. Put it in your car and go drive around. At that point in time, what I like to do, Kenny, is if people start using it, we can start getting a question bank that we can work with. Then we can actually follow through. But I want them to use that function to see where they're at first. Then they can actually expound on that. Because I could tell you all day long, every corner, what you're doing on the straightaways, what to look for. You can even see the lateral G's, everything on this. But until they use it, we need to get the questions.
Well, I think that's a challenge to you guys out there. I think Brad may have already put the link up to the track app so you guys can download it and start playing with it. And then maybe we can have Tony back in a couple of weeks to talk about tuning and the track app. Because I know everybody wants to know about tuning. It's not as easy as you think. I can tell you from experience. You really
easy.
Everybody can know what you're doing. I know more than one time. Quote, expert tuners have blown up motors on the dyno. I mean, it happens more than not. But we like I say, we use Tony. Actually, we do our tuning remotely. We've got a dyno here that we use, and we go to the dyno and get everything warmed up, and then Kurt, hits his computer and logs in, and Tony logs in, and we make a run, download the data files, and I take a picture of the air fuel and send it to Tony. Does that and send it back, and before you know it, we're making a lot of horsepower.
Just like this, yeah, the magic finger.
Yeah, magic fingers.
Yeah, the tuning portion of it, once you have the data. Again, tuning doesn't work without data, and we talked about this before on the previous show. The data logging is the most important. Once you start using an RTD or the MPVI2 for your data logging on the screen, you can see everything. You can see your temperatures, you can see your RPMs, you know where you're at, the braking input, the gear, everything shows up. You can, it's kind of basically, it's make what you want to make. And like you said, you can, it's a video interface. It overlays with it as well. So you can actually, when you're running the video, you can actually see your RPMs and everything on the screen as well. It's high definition video too.
Well, that's like way cool. So, okay, well, let's see if we have any questions coming in. In the meantime, I just remembered some things I forgot to talk about on the JRZs. So let me switch back. I'm going to use the rears because they're a little easier to deal with. But if you haven't been in one of my shock things before, I mean, there's like 4 different parts to our shock packages. One is the mainspring. Second is the helper spring, and in between there's a little spacer, and then on the bottom there's TRB, torsion release bearing. And what the torsion release bearing is, it's like roller bearings. It's really thin roller bearings, and as the spring moves up and down, it kind of does these twitchy things, and that helps. It's torsion release, so it helps release the torsion that builds up as the spring's moving up and down. And the reason we use a helper spring is because when we go to drag race guys use like these big long 14-inch springs, but they're a really low rate. So when you put the car down, it compresses. Well, we use such high rate springs that when we get the car at ride height, if we were to jack the car up, all of a sudden there's a gap between the spring and the top of the shock. So that's what the helper spring is for. It does nothing more than take up space. It has a spring value of maybe 10 pounds at the most. So when weight goes on the car, it compresses completely, and then you're on the mainspring. So some elements I forgot to mention when I was talking about the GRZs. But yeah, I'm super fan of GRZs. With COVID, dealing with Europe has been kind of interesting over the last year, but they're starting to get themselves sorted out. So, hey, Brad or Carrie, do we have any questions coming in?
We sure do. I'm gonna put them up on the screen, and then Tony can answer them. Also, I was wondering if Tony, just by what you were mentioning, what do you think it would be good if we had people load this on their system and then you come back? Is that what you're talking about? We have a special session on teaching them how to do that?
Absolutely. Same thing I do in my tuning classes. I have them go in the field, use the stuff, see what they have, figure out the questions at that point, because really until you use it, there's not a lot of questions because you're going to answer several of them, but then you may have questions that pertain to it. And that's what I like to do is actually revisit those questions. Because once you get to using it, people are going to find stuff that they want to use. And whether they upgrade to the telemetry data where you can transmit it so someone on the sideline can watch it on the internet. You know, there's all kinds. I mean, the sky's the limit on what you want to do once you start using it. But for the basic functions, once they start using it, build the question bank of stuff that they have questions on. Then we can answer it for them really using the system. And even going farther to using the tuning part of it on there as well.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just click on the questions, and then Kenny, you can read them to Tony, and we'll go from there. How's that sound?
Okay. So click on the questions, she says. I don't see a question. Oh, there we go. This is a Track Addict app. Incorporate friction circle for braking, acceleration, and cornering.
Okay, so basically with the lateral G's on there, you can actually see, so I guess that'd be creating a friction circle for the braking, acceleration, and cornering, because you're going to see how much you're scrubbing off on there. So it's a timing. You can actually put the cursor on there and move it and see where you're at timing wise.
Okay, got another question?
The questions for data logging, absolutely. So the main thing here, obviously RPM, we want speed. We want what gear we're in. We want our temperatures, oil temperature, inlet air temperature, and our engine coolant temperature, and spark, and whether the NOx sensor is pulling timing or not as well. You can also put in your acceleration rate on the late model vehicles, so you can actually see your acceleration rate as well on what the computer thinks you're actually doing. So, and even some of the later model vehicles have have lateral G stuff incorporated into it.
So there you go, Hurstfer, if you're out there, I think you need to load that up, and you can tell whether it's actually pulling timing out or not.
That is absolutely perfect. That's exactly the function. I used it in the autocross. I could tell. I ran my Focus RS. I have a Focus RS, and I did cars and cones with Jimmy Day's crew a couple weeks ago, and had a blast. I was able to use the function, put it on there, see everything was going on. And I had other people watching. I had like 10 people leaning over my shoulder looking at all this stuff to see how it worked. They're all downloading the app on their phones so that they could do the same thing.
That's kind of cool. Okay, Carrie, we've got another question. Either for Tony or for me.
We don't have any more questions right now, but if you have any, send them in. I think everybody's out on track today. Tony, in fact, I think you're someplace right now. What are you doing?
I'm in Norwalk, Ohio, and we came back to the hotel to do this as it was loud at the track. We're only 5 minutes from the track. And so we're up here for the NMRA event, and it's an awesome event in Norwalk, Ohio. Weather's great today. Cars are going fast, so we're having a great time up here.
Yeah, we were actually at that one year. We were up there in Norwalk. It seems to me it's like a very big amusement park not too far from there.
Yeah, we saw it yesterday. We actually went out to Sandusky Point and went out to the point there. We were looking at Lake Erie and stuff, and I could see it all these roller coasters. And I'm like, yeah, I want to go over there. So yeah, so we're all talking, and it just opened up. You know, obviously the world's opening back up. So
okay, what? First we'll use the gas.
Boy,
Okay.
Ken, you're not being a very good host, are you?
I'm trying to
Do
figure
I
out
need to
what
read the questions out loud?
I'm trying to figure out what he's talking about.
For Christopher, he
Particulate
uses
filter.
gas particular. Do you know how that affects the car's performance when burning the particles off? That might be a European thing. I'm not sure. Tony, do you know about that?
Actually, anytime you have gas particulates there and it burns it off, you're actually, depending on where that particulate filter is, first of all, emissions wise is better. And obviously, it actually creates heat expansion. So if it's a turbo car or something like that, it's going to run better with that particulate burning off the particulates. And emissions wise, obviously, if it's burning off the stuff that's not going to the atmosphere and polluting the atmosphere. So performance wise, when you're a wide open throttle, remember that your combustion is happening and then exhaust has to get out. So any of that exhaust stuff that's not burnt, such as, self EGR stuff, that would help you on your performance side.
Okay, well, actually, Christopher has a S550 and he's in Bulgaria.
Okay. Wow.
He's got the European version, so it's already down on power.
Yeah. Well, he has a couple of advantages. Ford, when they did that, they actually released some of the torque they reduced the actual torque management because of that. I've seen some of the files and what they use over there, and it's actually there's kind of a catch-22 on both sides.
Well, I think the European, Hertzberg was saying they just kind of knocked the horsepower down a little bit for Europe.
Well, they actually supposedly knocked the horsepower down, but rated a little bit less. But with the torque management, Ford reduced some of the torque management, so they actually feel better than some of the U.S. versions, even though the horsepower is a little less.
It sounds like a little bit of trickery with the calibration.
Hey, got to do what you got to do in the real world, right?
Yeah. Okay, Kara, have we got any more questions coming in? Otherwise, we're going to have a nice short session today.
Well, I think, Tony, is there any common questions that people ask you, or have you already answered those? Or can you think of anything that, what are the common questions people ask you about the traffic?
The very first one, I'll relate this to the event that I was just at. So the very first question was, how much is the app? I tell them it's free. They're like, it's free? I'm like, yeah, it's free. There are upgrades, such as if you want to set it up, telemetry data is actually going through the internet and transferring to somebody sitting on the side. You got your own crew that want to watch everything live. You can do that too. Those are upgrades that you can buy and do. But the basic functions are free, and all of the data stuff is free on there that you can do. If you purchase, which I recommend everybody do, is buy an MPVI2 or an RTD, which is the HP Tuners units. Obviously, the MPVI2 allows you to tune it yourself. The RTD allows a tuner to do the tunes for you, back and forth. And we have a new release, which I'm going to announce it right here because I can. We are going to be releasing something called the Tune Delivery Network, which is an app on your phone that you can upload and download your tunes to your car through the Bluetooth of the device, as well as your data logs up and down through the internet as well for your tuner or for yourself if you're tuning your own car. So that'll open up a whole thing. I mean, the app itself is the Tune Delivery Network. It's not available yet publicly. We are using it for private testing right now. It is working very well. This will also allow us with the Track Addict, you can upload and download directly from your phone as well. Everybody has a phone. If you don't have a smartphone, you're in the 18th century at this point. So with smartphones out there and the apps available, we have the technology to up and load, download, look at our stuff. I mean, we just have to embrace the technology for what we want to do.
This morning of a new application from HP Tuners. So let's see. Joe has a question. 20 GT350.
Okay, we need to get some practice on you, Kenny. Tony, I have a 2020 Shelby GT350. Will a dyno tune increase my HP and torque? And will a tune void my factory warranty?
Okay, straight up front. If you flash your computer, your warranty could be void. If you go in there with a rod hanging out the side of your motor and they go in there and look and see the flash counter has been changed, yes, they can void your warranty. They're not going to void your warranty if your window motor is not working and stuff like that if the car's tuned. Okay, but there's a Magnuson Act in 1996. They still have to prove, if you really wanted to push the envelope, that the tune actually caused the problem. But just to make it simple, the answer is yes. If you do flash the vehicle, you could void the warranty. There are usually, and this is across the country as well as internationally, there are dealerships that work with people who are tuning their own cars or have their cars tuned, and they understand that. But it's a personal accountability thing. if you want to do something and you've paid $80,000 for a car and it's your car and you want to do something, then you take the personal accountability for accepting things can happen. You really, I mean, if you go in there and you put a supercharged car and you blow it up, you go back to Ford and say, hey, this is your fault. The Ford's going to look like you're crazy. And you wouldn't expect anyone to do the same thing to you if you're putting tile on someone's wall at their bathroom. Okay, this is the same principle. It's personal accountability. Will it make more horsepower and torque? Yes. Will it drive better? Yes. Will you blow it up? No, unless you do something stupid with it or somebody pushes it on the edge, which most tuners are not going to do. Most tuners don't like seeing their stuff blow up. So we like to be a little conservative. I get accused of being conservative. I'd rather be the conservative than taking and blowing people's stuff up every day. I've been in this 38 years, and I can count on two hands stuff that's actually messed up. These many right here were my fault. I admit it 100%. All right. That's a lot of cars that I've done without blowing up. So take that into consideration.
Yeah, I mean, I said earlier, I mean, I've seen supposedly expert tuners blow cars up on dynos. Yes, I mean, you really need to know what you're doing. And that's why we rely on Tony, because he obviously knows what he's doing. So have you got any more questions? Carrie, are we going to more questions? Make a calibration for road racing versus drag racing. That's a good question.
Okay, so again, I kind of mentioned this earlier. On a drag racing setup, we have a controlled environment. We're going from here to here, 1320 feet, or 660 if we're doing 8th mile racing. We have a very controlled environment. We have a window that we can work with. That window allows us to push things on that edge for that window, tuning the car for that. And when we go to road racing, that's a whole different story. We're on the track making laps. There's heat and cool, heat and cool, heat and cool. It has to be set up for that, for longevity. This is why the inlet air temperatures, the oil temperatures, having a good oil cooler, watching those oil temperatures, and those oil temperatures start going up. We got to know to get out of it or make it safer at that point. So those are all things that when you're tuning the two different worlds come into play. I guess you'd say the cross of that would be like an autocross, was like the middle ground. You have a controlled time, but you're still pushing the car through certain parts of it. So even that one's a little more tuning calibration different than the two. So drag racing, point A to point B, I can push things up to an edge. I can even program the car so the catalytic converter won't even go into over temp until it just crosses a quarter mile. So everything still functions emissions wise perfectly, but at the quarter mile part is when it would actually come and start dumping the fuel to cool the cat off. Great idea. In a road racing circuit, we don't exactly have that. It's going to get hot. It's going to have, we have to watch what we do with their fueling. We have to make sure we don't have any misfires. We have to make sure the oil cooler is cooling the oil correctly. And to me, that's one of the biggest things. A lot of GT500s, GT350s suffered massive failures because of the oil temperatures. That's one reason Ford put the coolers on them. The Boss 302s had oil coolers on them. And they're still, in my personal opinion, not up to par. I would go to a much better cooler if I was road racing one of those cars.
Joe was seeing some high oil temperatures, and he put our triple pass radiator in. And I think it took like 20 degrees of oil temperature out just by putting a better radiator in. So
yeah, 20 degrees of oil temperature is huge in the racing. I mean, anybody knows 20 degrees is massive, okay? If you can drop 20 degrees of oil temperature, you're making that engine last a lot longer. The car's going to go faster, longer for a longer period of time. Longevity is the key.
So, okay, so yeah, just so if you run into anybody with the GT350 that doesn't want to go to the expense of adding an extra oil cooler, all you just swap out the radiator and it'll drop the water temperature and oil temperature. We had another customer up at Road America that with the GT350, it took our radiator took 30 degrees of water temperature out. So
the other question here was about the changes like speed limiters, cooling fans, et cetera, for road racing. Okay, pretty thing. Speed limiters. All right. So in a normal application, a factory Ford vehicle, we'll say a Mustang, is normally 155 mile an hour, okay, right off the bat. A lot of us exceed that on the track as well, so we would move that. Now, do we just want to make it up to 200 mile an hour? If the car is going to try to do that, just set up at a point. What I don't want to see is someone moving the speed limiter so they're bouncing off a limiter like on a straightaway or whatever else. Now, there are classes, I will tell you, there are classes that say we need to have the speed limiters, the rev limiters at a certain point. And they'll listen for the speed, for the rev limiters, knowing what tire you have as they go through the corners. And if they don't hear the rev limiter coming off, they go flag the car, pull the computer, do things like that. So I tell the guys, look at your, and the women, because I've got two right now that road race cars that are very adept at tuning. And one of them is they'll actually move their limiter. So they just click it as they're coming out of that straightaway. And it's perfect time. The officials hear it. They hear the little click, 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 and they go, okay. They go on their merry way. Don't worry about that car, but they're still winning races because they can drive. All right. So cooling fans, you want, obviously, the cooling fans, when you're at speed, you got air flow going across it. But when you slow down, cautions or other things going on, you want those fans to come on at a point. I would target basically about 10 degrees above whether my coolant temp thermostat is. So if I'm running a 180 thermostat, I like the 188 or 190 coming on, so it cycles it back and forth. And the same way when we come down to the actual inlet air temperatures. I know when I data log it, I know my inlet air temperature hits about 150, 155 degrees. If that's the case, I can modify my spark retard. So just as it starts increasing over the 155 point, it'll start pulling more timing and keeps the car safe, but I still go fast without hurting it.
Plenty of tricks. Okay, we got any more questions, Carrie?
Well, this is our last call for questions. Great questions so far. I do want to tell you, everybody, a little bit about the brake workshop we have coming up. Kenny's going to cover everything brakes, from brake systems, rotors. What else are you going to talk about, Kenny? Brake cooling, just everything you want to know about brakes. And that is going to be, pads is going to be a big part.
Pads is the important one.
And so what we're going to do is we're going to cover brakes, and it's going to be in about a week and a half. It's June 30th. And then if you need to register, Brad is going to be putting a link in the comments, and we'll be obviously adding it to our newsletter and to our social media channels. So make sure you join that. You don't want to miss it. And then we are probably going to replay it in one of the Cars and Coffee a little bit later. So if you can't make the Wednesday workshop, you can definitely view it in Cars and Coffee. And I'm going to see if there's any other questions here, and then we'll bring Tony back in. And let's see here. We have another question. So I'll add.
Interference.
Okay, so here's the question of the day. This has actually been a very good question as of late. Are we looking at tuning the electrical vehicles? The answer is yes. I will tell you, anyone out there notices that Holly bought AEM in the past 2 months. Holly bought AEM. They didn't buy them because they wanted their standalones. They bought them because they're all their EV stuff that they're doing. So just heads up, electric vehicle tuning is here. We're alive, and we are working towards it as well as and doing it. Ken Block's playing one. Yep. There's some other people out there testing. And to be honest with you, we are testing the reliability of the batteries and things like that, because, in the electrical world, there's two knobs, guys and girls. There's a voltage and an amperage. Okay. Amperage is torque, voltage is horsepower. Think of it that way. So we're turning those knobs, but we have to be careful because we can kill batteries. We can also burn up systems. So, and that's why the Mach-E and the Cobra Jet, if you've seen the Cobra Jet, electrical Cobra Jet, Ford has already pushing the envelope with this to see what they can do. So yes, they are tuning them. It is coming. So it's definitely in the future. So we'll see. The future's now, though. It's happening.
Yeah, I think Carrie has we'd like to get one of those Mach-E's at some point, but they're still pretty hard to get. So everybody wants one.
My contact phone number and email. Okay, so the easiest way to get a hold of me is email. It's tgonyon@hbtuners.com. I'm the technical specialist for the teams for HB Tuners now. Obviously, my company, or I should say my wife's company, Tuners Inc., we still work out of there, but I'm the field representative for HB Tuners. I'm actually at all the races now, as many as I can go to. So I'm traveling every week somewhere. So the email is probably easiest to get a hold of me. If you want to get a hold of me by phone, I think we'll put that up here in a minute. I'll make sure that my new phone number is up there for everybody, and feel free to give me a call at that point. Yeah, the email is probably the best thing because I look at email all day long. It dings in my ear when I'm driving as well. So, and I'll respond to those emails.
Okay, well, there you go, Joe.
Okay, great.
I'm sure getting a hold of Tony. You just always get a hold of us, and we'll find him for you. So.
Where's Waldo, right? Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I think that concludes our questions, Kenny. So.
Okay, well, I'm reading my notes, going back to my notes. Next Saturday we're going to do something kind of interesting. We had in the Speed Therapy Academy, somebody sent in or shared with us some images of what can happen to an SN95 when you convert over to an IRS and use coilover shocks and don't use a shock tower brace. We're going to talk about that. And we thought, well, that's just a good example to go back and talk through the whole on the performance philosophy, foundation philosophy, and talk chassis support. So we haven't talked chassis support for a while. So next week we're going to do a little chassis support and talk about the what I think Ben was sent in is as far as what can happen if you don't take precautions if you start changing things. So with that, and then the break workshop on Wednesday the 30th. If there's no more questions, Carrie, I think I'm going to actually get out of here on time today. Actually, early for a change.
Yeah, Tony's going to be able to get back to the.
Yeah, Tony, get back to the track.
Make sure you guys download that Track Addict app. Look through there. There's tons of information in there. Generate your questions. Hit us up next time, and we'll go through it. But once you open it and start using it, I think you're going to like it. And if here one of the things comes into play. If you see something you think that you would like to see in there, and we get a general consensus that a lot of people want to see it, I can pass that to the engineers. That's my job as a technical specialist in the field. I can say, hey, we'd like to see this, or we don't want to see this. And that helps us make the product better as well.
Oh, cool. Well, there we go. You guys get inside information, inside access, but being part of our family. Okay, well, listen, Tony, I want to thank you. We'll let you get back out to the strip. Don't you need to just drive right past that amusement park. You know, as boring as it might be.
Hey, they have ice cream for $1 a pound at this place. Okay.
Oh my God.
So we yesterday, me and Sherry split one. Today, I'm sure we'll split another one. But just so you know, the racetrack here, if you've ever been to the Summit, it's awesome. People are wonderful. The people that work there are awesome. So a big shout out to the Summit team up here for making us feel at home.
Okay, well, that's pretty cool. So with that, everybody, no more questions. I think we're going to check out early. I've got plenty of things to do this weekend. I have more than plenty of things to do. So I'm going to get an early start. And Tony, get back to track. Again, Tony, thanks so much. Your expertise is always welcome and deeply appreciated. So everybody, will see Tony in the coming weeks, and I'll see everybody else next Saturday. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.